So Ben Shapiro goes on the Breakfast Club, a morning show, and somehow the topic of abortion comes up. But let's just say this gets dicey really quick.
Abortions, right?
I'm pro-life, yes.
Even in cases of incest and rape?
Yes.
Why?
Because this is a sort of a fundamental definitional question. If you believe life begins at conception, then regardless of the source of the life, it now has an independent interest in life. So that is not to minimize the tremendous evil of rape or incest. I believe rapists should be executed, frankly, or chemically castrated at best. But that's sort of a different question from the independent source of life and whether this, again, it gets back to definitions. And this conversation tends to be either you're on one side of that or the other. If you don't believe life begins at conception, then obviously you believe abortion is acceptable in a wide variety of circumstances. If you believe it's an independent life deserving of protection, then you believe it's an independent life deserving of protection.
Lauren, what do you think about that? I'm just that's one.
I think that a woman should be able to choose to do what she wants to do wherever she decides to do it. I believe that women should be able to abort babies if they want to, if they feel like that's what they need to do.
Do you have a time limit on that, out of curiosity?
I mean, I think it should happen earlier on if it were me making a decision for myself. But I think it's up to the woman and what she's personally experiencing and what she personally went through. I really think it's a per person thing. That's why I think it's crazy when you have like these structures and these like people who are not in that situation making the decision for the woman of what you can and can't do, because it's very like per person. My situation might be different than another woman who's sitting next to me.
Right. So again, this is sort of the definitional issue that we're talking about, because you're talking about what a woman should be allowed to do. And what I'm talking about is the definition of personhood of the separate person inside the woman. I think that what I push on is why do you personally believe that a woman should have an abortion earlier?
I think from personal experience, I've been in a situation. I just think emotionally and mentally, it's less that you think about, but it does depend on how you think of when the life is formed or should be looked at as like a life that you
right. So that
yeah.
I think is the big question, and that's where the disconnect is. But
what I'm saying is that's always going to be different for each person.
But I don't think that the subjective definition of life is how we define life, meaning that you being uncomfortable with a woman having an abortion in the 9th month, you're saying that just because you're uncomfortable with it, that doesn't mean that you should stop a woman from doing that. My point is that life has a definition, right? We all agree, for example, that a 1-month-old baby should not be drowned. Right? We all agree on that. And that's not up to the personal, should not be drowned. You shouldn't take the baby and drown it in a bathtub, right? And the question is, well, why? Because we now understand that the 1-month-old baby, everyone agrees with this, right? That except for Peter Singer at Princeton, that a 1-month-old baby has an independent interest in life, right? That is a life that is separate from the woman and requires protection. Okay, so if it is a life, then we now have an objective definition. It doesn't matter what the state of mind of the woman is. It doesn't matter if she thought, you know what, I have a really tough life. My life will be better off if this baby is drowned, if I don't have to deal with this baby, and so I'm going to drown the baby. The baby has an independent actual interest in living. And so the question becomes, is that true before birth? And I think for the vast majority of Americans are actually somewhere where you are practically, meaning that the vast majority of Americans do see in sort of a soft way a distinction between, the early stages of life, month 2 and 9-month, right? Like the approval in America of abortion at the very late stages is very, very low because most Americans.
It stops around like 4 or 5 months for most people, right?
Well,
like,
I mean,
most places.
Most abortions are performed in the first trimester.
Yeah.
Yes. But the point that I'm making is that the logic that you're using allows for abortion like literally right before the baby is born. And so then the question becomes, why is that okay? And it's not a woman's choice at that point, whether that is a life or not, because you don't get to artificially or subjectively define the meaning of things.
I get that. We're playing with semantics, though. But
yeah, that's what
it's not semantic. Either it's a life or it's not a life, right?
If your daughter was raped,
no,
it's almost like you're saying she's raped, but I'm going to make her have this child.
No, I mean,
because you're saying you don't believe in abortion, even if rape and incest, right?
What I'm saying there is that I don't believe in abortion in cases of rape and incest. The practical effect is horrible. Okay, mm-hmm. I'm not going to pretend that it is not emotionally horrifying, that particular situation. Mm-hmm. The question is whether it has an independent interest in life or not, and whether there's a third party involved. If you don't believe there's a third party deserving of protection, I totally get it. I get it. Mm-hmm. But we should understand that that's the actual conversation. The actual conversation is about whether you believe that this is an interested third party being. Do you get to kill that interested third party being, this human life with potential, or do you not? If you, and so the actual argument that I don't like is the idea that you can that everybody, it's up to every single person to define when life begins and when life does not begin. That actually is not true, right? There's either a standard or there's not a standard. Now, you can say that life begins when the baby is independent of the mom. Okay? I think it's a very dicey biological argument, and I think most Americans agree with that life only begins when the baby exits.
I think it begins with a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's where most Americans are, and that's extremely early, right? And so if the life begins with the heartbeat, then you're now talking about, depending on your definition of a heartbeat, somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks, right? Very, very, very early. And so if that now has an independent interest, you're talking about abortion restrictions very early on. And so that's why, a lot of red states have signed heartbeat laws, for example. Right? And so, again, I think that the clarity is good, right? Because now we can have a conversation. Where do you think life begins? And that's a better conversation than the sort of assumption by, I think, people who are not pro-life, that pro-life is just about controlling the woman's body. No, it isn't, okay? It really is not. Like, for pro-lifers, it has literally nothing to do with the woman's body. It has to do with the independent interest.
I like how he's going about this argument right here. He's not saying that she's a bad person for having a contrary opinion to himself. He basically wants to know her definition, so then when he asks questions about her belief system, then she can answer for that. Do you think this is fair, yes or no? Like this woman was saying that she should be able to cancel it whenever she wants. It's up to that individual person what they want to do. If that's the case, then there is absolutely no restrictions whatsoever. 1 minute before a child is born, you think that you can just kill it because you don't want it anymore? Because every state gets to make their own laws and regulations, and if you have an issue with your state, then you can move to another state. But what the left has done is they have hijacked this conversation into it's my body, my choice. I can do whatever the heck I want to because it's only my body. But the sad fact of the matter is, it's not just you. You were carrying somebody else, and that child has no voice to speak up for itself and relies on society and laws and basic human decency to protect it. But don't you think it's so funny that they were so adamant about my body, my choice, except when it came to people getting vaccinated? It's so hypocritical.
Definition, it does control what a woman can and can't do with her body.
Well, there are downstream effects to definitions, of course, right? I mean, if I define life as it begins at a heartbeat, then that is going to have public policy ramifications that affect, just as in anything else. If I define theft in a particular way, that's going to have downstream effects on people who commit that definition of the crime. And if I broaden the definition, it's going to include more people. And that's true for literally any legal term. It's true for any word that we use in life. As you expand the definition, it affects more people in different ways. But that doesn't change the necessity to have the conversation about what the definition is. And I think it's an easy way out to basically say, well, I have a definition of life, but and it gets into very dicey territory because historically people have defined away entire populations as not human, and so we can't do that, right? Like you really don't want people looking at other people and saying, well, I don't think that this person. I mean, to take the obvious and most controversial example, for a huge percentage of American history, there was a wide variety of people in America who believed black people were not fully human and therefore you couldn't enslave them.
Yep,
right?
Compromise.
Correct. And so like so was that a subjective question? That was not a subjective question. Black people are fully human and just as human as white people, equal, the same, right? Like and so if somebody were to say, listen, I personally am anti-slavery, right? I think that slavery is personally wrong, but it's really up to every person to define for themselves whether a black person is fully a human or not fully a human. Be like, what the?
I don't think you can compare those two things.
Why?
Just because I think, if I'm making, so if you're a slave master, right, and you say, I believe slavery is right because black people aren't human, like, that's a decision that you're making that is based on things like, what the slaves can do for you on your property. Like the benefit of what slavery will do for that slave master is so different than if a woman has to have a baby because she was raped and how that will affect her life. Like that, I think you have a decision that you can make a lot easier.
It's almost like you force a woman twice, right? Because
she says, do I become a slave master or not versus do I have a baby or not?
She has this baby and now she's forced to have
Let's
a
try a
child.
Jewish analogy. Go.
Sure. So sure. So if there was an entire population in Europe that was considered subhuman by the Nazis and they were exterminated, if you said, I am personally against the extermination of the Jews, but I understand why Germans could think that Jews are subhuman, and so it really is up to every individual to determine whether a Jew is human or not fully human and can be put in the back of a van and gassed. We'd be like, what in the world?
You're saying there should be no pro-choice in regards to that?
Yeah, so the definitions are not a matter of choice. Definitions are a matter of actual objective fact. Otherwise, we can't even have a conversation. Because if words have meanings, then we all have to agree on at least that, right? That much we have to agree on is the meaning of the words. And when it comes to, sort of the slave master analogy, the point that I'm making here is not about the personal experience of the slave master. In fact, I'm saying it's completely irrelevant. What I'm saying is that the reason that slavery was wrong is because black people are fully independent human beings who require the protection of the law in the same way as everyone else. And if you're a pro-lifer, you believe that's also true of the unborn.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I'm a pro-choice person. But I do wonder, how come pro-life people aren't anti-war?
Well, I mean,
Because
I think everybody is anti-war. I think the question is the definition of when war is appropriate. I don't who's running around going like, war is awesome. Yes, more war.
Okay,
Let's do it.
So 50,000 kids have been killed in Gaza because of this current war.
Depends on the definitions and the
injured,
list that you're getting.
right?
Well, I mean, also depends on how you're defining kid, because the way that Hamas defines kid is very different than how they define kid when it comes to recruiting for Hamas, right? They're 15-year-olds with AKs on the battlefield, unfortunately.
Out of the womb.
It is not 50,000
Well,
out of the womb.
okay.
I mean, if you're talking about like very, very small children, it is much, much lower than
But
that.
my point is, there are children that are being killed.
Yes, who have died as collateral damage in the war, yes.
So shouldn't pro-lifers be totally against that?
Well, I mean, I'm against the death of any innocent human being. The question is, when you're doing foreign policy, how you prevent more deaths in the future. And the point that I think Israel is making is this war
So you're
was
basing it off legislation, and it's actually not a matter of morals and values. Or
no,
religion.
of course, it's a matter of morals and values. But you can't be. Let's put it this way: it's incredibly reductive to simply say that if you are a moral person, then you oppose all war, because what that does, it allows immoral people to then use that against you to destroy your civilization. If your community is attacked and bad people who don't have the same values as you decide to kill you, kill your children, rape your wife, and kill her, are you supposed to say, well, I'm anti-war, and so I'm going to sit here and do nothing?
So isn't that the same if somebody rapes a woman and impregnates them? Shouldn't, in that case, that person be allowed to make a choice?
Well, no. The point is that the prevention. This is why you should minimize civilian casualties. To get back to the beginning of the conversation, this is why it's independently moral to try as much as possible to minimize civilian casualties. Right? When it comes to abortion, the idea is you can minimize that casualty by just preventing it.
How can you prevent being raped?
Well, I mean, that's a different question. Again,
but let's talk about that, because what I don't like is people pick.
Listen, first of all, when we're talking about rape and abortion, we should note that well over 99% of abortions are not undertaken because of rape. And so, if you want to come with me and ban all abortions except for rape, I'll probably make that trade for you. Meaning, if you want to ban all abortions, elective abortions, and what I have to do is give up abortion with regard to rape and incest. That is a trade on a pragmatic level politically that I would make.
Okay, so you're not down on that hill.
Well, it's not that I believe that, again, rape and incest, I think, is the reason people choose that argument is because it's the hardest argument to make emotionally from the pro-life side. Mm-hmm. But I think that we should note that the vast majority of abortions have nothing to do with rape or incest. They have to do with elective abortions. What was that?
You never got the wrong person pregnant?
Jesus.
No, my wife 4 times, thank God.
You see, that is the classic playbook. They always go the emotional argument, saying the most extreme circumstances possible, when 99% of all the abortions are just people who don't want to start a family and say, you know what, let's just get rid of this child. That's how a lot of people in America think, and that's what he's proposing we eliminate. And the thing is also, there's a difference between your own personal beliefs and what you think will get passed as a law. I might have personal beliefs that abortion begins at conception, and I believe a life starts then. Does that mean there will never be another abortion again because this is my belief system? No, I would be foolish to believe that. And the thing is, too, a lot of people will bring out the argument, why don't we get rid of abortion for everybody except for those who are engaged in rape or incest or something like that? That's also a slippery slope, because if you only allow it then, I can almost guarantee the amount of people who would get accused of rape who did not rape somebody would skyrocket just off of the fact that that's their only hope of getting an abortion. People might be sitting there and thinking, there's not a person alive who would ever do that, falsely accuse somebody of rape. There's a lot of sick people in this country, and I would not put it past him. I really do enjoy the way that Ben Shapiro speaks, because he speaks with such elegance and simplicity, and it's just common sense. He's able to get out these complex ideas and just articulate them in a way that's so easy to understand, and he says it so quickly. You can tell he's extremely well-read and he knows what he's talking about. The fact of the matter is, if you get into an argument or a debate about abortion, that's probably one of the biggest conversation topics that will get you into a fight. Just because there are so many people who are fired up and pissed off about it that a lot of people shy away from having a discussion about this, just off the sheer fact that it might get very violent, it might get very chaotic very quickly. This reminds me of a great quote from Ronald Reagan. He says, I've noticed something about everybody who seems to be pro-life. is that every single one of these people were once a baby. They were once the unborn, and they were only put onto this earth through God's grace and God's grace alone. It is a gift. The odds of us being here right now are 1 in infinity. It really is. The perfect combination of factors had to align. Everything had to be in perfect agreement for us to be here, and a lot of people don't take full advantage of the miracle that is life. So if you ask me, I think it's our duty as human beings just to protect the unborn, because they don't have a voice, they don't have anyone standing up for themselves, so we have to do it for them. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below. How do you think Ben Shapiro handled this? And if you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like, comment, subscribe, and wish you guys nothing but the best. Until next time.